They are rapidly becoming central to every finance organization. If we look at what is happening in the market today, it's clear that compliance is evolving very quickly. Across the globe, governments are introducing e-invoicing mandates at an increasing pace, with many countries already active and others following in the coming years. Before we start, just a few practical notes. This session is held in English. You can submit your questions in the chat during the session. We will address all questions at the end during the Q&A. The session is being recorded and both recording and slides will be shared afterwards. In today's session, we want to make this very concrete. We have two excellent partners joining us who will show how this works in practice. First, Basware will explain how compliance can be approached as a strategic capability. Then Ixoot will demonstrate how organizations can translate regulatory pressure into efficiency gains, especially within SAP-driven environments. Let me briefly introduce today's speakers. We are joined by Hans Willems and Marijn Westering from Ixoot, and Abigail Myers-NTI from Basware. So with that, I think we have set the stage. Let's move from compliance as an obligation to compliance as a real business opportunity. Abigail, the floor is yours.
Thank you. If someone can just let me know when they're able to see my slides, and then I'll start.
I can see them, Abigail.
Perfect. Great. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me today. As you can tell by my accent, I am actually based in London, so it's still the morning for me, but I hope that you are all enjoying your lunch and learn right now. So today, I want to focus on compliance as a strategy, because one message that I really want to leave everyone with over the course of the next 25 minutes is simple. So invoice compliance has stopped being a back office checkbox and has become a board level question. And this is really because with the wave of e-invoicing and e-reporting mandates that are rolling across Europe and the world, the way that you issue and receive an invoice really determines how you can keep trading in a market. So today I want to start off with who Basware is. Then I'm going to share some findings from some research that we ran with the Financial Times on how large enterprises are really handling compliance. And then because of the market that we're in, I'm going to give a really brief update on Belgium and the Netherlands. And then I want to round out and bring the focus back to how Basware fits into the SAP landscape. So starting with the setting the scene of who Basware are and what we actually do. So hopefully everyone will have heard of invoice lifecycle management by now. And what this really means in practice is that we are centered around one platform, one source of truth, and covering every invoice end to end. And three things that really make this work in practice are intelligent automation. So again, I would be remiss if I didn't speak about AI today, because it really is everywhere. So our AI is invoice centric. And what we mean by that is that it's trained on a data set of over 2.3 billion invoices, meaning that it's able to deliver real and measurable return. And it's just not automation for automation's sake. Our next key pillar is all invoices everywhere. And that really is because Basware is a truly global platform. And our hope is that we can support our customers with invoice transactions all over the world. So even if there isn't some kind of invoicing mandate, we can still support invoice processing. And then the third, and the one that I arguably care about the most, given that I'm in the global compliance team, is full compliance. And what Basware means when we think about compliance is thinking past the invoice mandates and really considering end-to-end compliance. So we're thinking about issuance and receiving, so AP and AR, but also thinking about the invoice lifecycle. So what we mean by that is everything from supplier onboarding to content validation, obviously from connections to the governments as well, and then thinking about archiving, and then ultimately ensuring that the invoices that you send and receive are ready to be paid. So we like to call ourselves leaders in the market, but we're also very proud that our customers and analysts also recognize us as leaders for compliance. And most recently, we've been recognized as a leader in the QKS Group Spark Matrix for compliance. And what they really singled out here is that Basware is able to automate the full invoice lifecycle from creation, validation, approval, payment, and archiving, as I just mentioned. We also stand out with our ability to handle really complex invoice scenarios, and that's thinking beyond the traditional AP capabilities that we're known for. And then something that I will speak on throughout this session, we're also really well suited towards global organizations. And that goes back to, in the previous slide, I mentioned Basware being everywhere. We thrive on understanding different country requirements and building that into our solution to really de-risk the invoice processing for you. So today, I'm going to spend the first half of the speaking session talking about the report that we commissioned with FT Longitude. And so in order to set the scene, I wanted to start with a quote that we actually got from that report. And it's from Alexandra Ball, who is a leading voice in indirect tax technology. She puts it very bluntly and says that if you can't issue a compliant invoice, you'll go out of business. And invoicing has become a matter of business survival, not just a matter of compliance, which needs to be taken very seriously. So I think this sounds, I guess, quite dramatic, but if you really think about what she's trying to say, I'm sure everyone on the call today will agree that invoicing compliance has always been important. However, with the rise of mandates and the shift to structured digital invoicing, now it's really inescapable. So in the old post-audit world, I'm not advocating for this or recommending that it was good, but I think we can all be aligned that there may have been some kind of old workarounds whereby you may have been accepting non-compliant invoices. However, in this new world where governments can see invoices sometimes in real time, this just isn't an option anymore. And this really means that having compliant processes is the only way to stay in business. So what are companies actually up against? At Basware, we like to categorize this into external and internal challenges, just to make it a bit clearer. I think that sometimes when we think about compliance, it's a bit of a landmine and there's so many different elements to consider. So on the external side, I've already touched on this, but the rising number of mandates, which again are external forces to companies that they have no control over. And not only is it the number of mandates that are changing, but it's also the deadlines. So again, anyone that's familiar with the upcoming French mandate that's happening in a couple of months, the 1st of September, this was originally due to happen 2 years ago and has been postponed by the French government many times. Again, if you're operating in that kind of environment, you need to be ready for anything. Next, after the mandates, ERP transformation deadlines, and that's forcing businesses to migrate their core platforms. And I'm sure that that's something that many of you are living with at the moment. Then we have, and this is impacting all of us, be it in our work life, but also in our personal lives, economic pressures, whereby there's an increasing pressure for cost savings and working capital optimization. And then on external challenges, I'll round out with fraud attempts. So fraud attempts have, again, much like mandates, always been there. But with the rise of AI, we have a lot more sophisticated fraud attempts. And again, I'd say that when you're looking at tax technology or invoicing technology, this is something that you're really going to be mindful of, and you're going to want your service provider to be able to help you with. On the internal side, I think that the challenges are just as significant. They're just coming from within. And so if we start off thinking about that, I'd start with high error rates and erroneous payments, which again can be linked to that fraud that I mentioned on the external side. Lack of visibility and control is another really key one. So I'd say when we're thinking about invoicing technology, one of the major gains that you get from technology is the ability to increase your visibility into your transactions, which helps to inform your future strategy. And then the last one, which again, with all of these mandates, is something that I think is becoming even more apparent, is fragmented technology landscape. So now we move to the meat of the session. So the report, which I've already mentioned. So this is something that Basware decided to commission in partnership with the Financial Times Group. We surveyed 400 different finance leaders and CFOs globally. And really, the reason why we did this is because I think that sometimes justifying compliance can feel like a theoretical exercise predicated on anecdotes that we all hear. What sometimes is lacking, and I've been working in invoicing compliance for over 15 years now, is actual facts. And that's what we really wanted to be able to present to the market with this research. There are a number of findings that we found, but because of the time today, I focused on 4 different areas. But also the slide decks are going to be shared with everyone after the call. And within there, you'll find a link so that you can access the full report and you can dig into it a bit further. So the first finding that I wanted to start with is really about the ownership of compliance and where it sits. So siloed ownership is really being replaced with cross-functional ambition. And if we look at the findings from the report right now of our respondents that we spoke to, 11% have a dedicated cross-functional compliance team, with 92% intending to create this cross-functional team empowered by their C-level executives. And why does this matter? I think this is a really important one to start with, because historically, when we think about invoicing compliance, this has really been seen as the tax team's problem alone. But with all of the different mandates that we're seeing, this really extends the remit. And the only way to really properly manage invoicing compliance risk is to make sure that all stakeholders are engaged from the outset of the project. Where invoicing compliance projects are going to fail is where we're really sticking to the old world, leaving it with the tax team and not including people like IT and risk functions from the beginning of a project. The next one, or the next finding that I'm going to talk through, is technology. And what we found here is that most companies are concerned that their current tools and systems aren't fit for purpose, but they know that they need to invest to optimize their processes. So when we looked at the people that we spoke to, 56% were worried about their existing tools. And like I mentioned, 95%, so basically nearly everyone, agreed that investing in compliance is really the key to saving money in the long term. So you see from there that whilst in the current landscape, people might think that their existing tools aren't good enough, investing is really the only way to move past that and the only way to be able to progress with everything that's happening around us. The next finding that I want to touch on is visibility. And I think that visibility directly is tied to technology, which I mentioned when I was running through the internal and the external challenges. Visibility into your transactions, your financial spend, etc., is really a prerequisite for running an efficient business, because without having visibility into what's going on, you will always be forced to be reactive. And here we can see that only 6% of the companies that we spoke to think that they currently have a centralized global oversight into their compliance operating model, which shows that there's a long way to go. But I want to end, not everything is doom and gloom here. So I wanted to end the findings by talking about compliance successes. And that's because, again, historically, I think that compliance has always been seen as a cost to the business. And that's why I wanted to bring to the forefront that compliance can also be a lever for growth. And here, from everyone that we spoke to, 88% of companies have said that they think that having a strategic approach to compliance means that they will be more likely to outperform critical targets. And I think, again, if you're looking to get buy-in from your senior stakeholders on this is really the metric that you want to be bringing to them, showing them that being compliant is not only a cost to the business, but it will ultimately help them in the long run. And so this is what I wanted to end with when speaking about the report. The next thing is the mandates. So again, this is going to be a theme throughout the session today. And I wanted to share an overview of just some of the e-invoicing and e-reporting mandates that are happening at the moment. This is something that Basware are really committed to researching on an ongoing basis. And we also make this material available to all of our customers on a regular basis as well. So e-invoicing mandates are nothing new. They've been in existence for a really long time. However, the rate at which these current mandates, the rate that they're increasing is definitely something new. And at the moment, there are over 60 countries who have either introduced or are planning to introduce an invoicing mandate in the coming years. So I'm not planning to go through every single one of the mandates that you see or every single one of the flags that you see on the screen. But if we think about some of the key mandates that are upcoming at the moment, I've already touched on this, but France is one of the biggest European markets to introduce a mandate to date. And they will be introducing their e-invoicing and e-reporting mandate on the 1st of September. This has been a very, very long road for them. And as I already mentioned, this has been postponed a number of times by the French tax administration because, firstly, their own system wasn't ready. And also they were aware that people in the market weren't ready. And with e-invoicing mandates, the reason why governments are typically doing this is so that they can get more visibility on spend, and they can reduce tax gaps. However, they need to be sure that they're not putting burdens on companies in the market as well, and that's why we often see these delays happen, often very last minute as well. If we think about something a bit closer to home, so in terms of a country update for Belgium, Belgium introduced their own version of the mandate at the beginning of this year, and they did something actually that was quite unique within Europe. We've already had e-invoicing mandates. Italy was the first one to introduce a mandate back in 2018, and as I've mentioned, France will do the same in September. But what Belgium opted to do is something called introduce a decentralized model. And ultimately, what that means is in Belgium, there isn't a government portal that's in the way. Invoices can be sent and received using the payable network, which was already in existence. It's an international interoperability model. And they also, in order to avoid introducing the burden that I mentioned, they had an initial 3-month grace period just to allow for companies who maybe hadn't had time to get things ready for the 1st of January. That grace period has since lapsed. So now all domestic transactions within Belgium need to be issued and sent in accordance with payable. You would think that given that we're now in June, this should mean that the story's over, everyone should be compliant. But the reason why I think that these e-invoicing mandates are very interesting is because even with governments introducing a mandate which seems clear, in Belgium, for example, since January, the tax object in Belgium has to be the structured data file. That's what needs to be archived. However, I still have conversations with customers whereby PDFs are also typically exchanged as well, just for readability purposes. And I still work with customers who continue to archive the PDF instead of the structured file, and that is a non-compliant flow. So I think what I'm trying to highlight here is when these mandates are introduced, it's really important to fully understand all of the requirements, make sure that you're not just issuing and sending in line with that mandate, but you're also making sure that you're flowing it through the entire process flow. And so, for instance, with something like archiving, if a PDF is also being exchanged, that's fine to archive that, but you also need to ensure that you're archiving the structured file, because if you're not, that's going to be a compliance gap and you're going to fall foul of penalties and sanctions for that, which in certain countries, for directors in Belgium, for instance, can actually equate to criminal prosecution. The next country that I wanted to touch on was the Netherlands, so neighbour of Belgium. And the Netherlands hasn't actually introduced a B2B invoicing mandate yet. However, they've announced an intention to have an online consultation. And at the moment, everything's looking like it would be quite similar to what Belgium's done. So looking like it would be a decentralized model. So again, not having that government portal, that one single point of failure, and leveraging something that companies are already using with payable. So moving on, I wanted to kind of tie everything together and put some really clear calls to actions to everyone on the call. The first one is for those live mandates. So for anyone that's operational in Belgium or Poland, is to make sure that if you are a multinational and you've done this in other regions, make sure that you're taking learnings from your prior projects and building that into things that are live now. So really good example again is the archiving example that I just mentioned. Make sure that you're understanding the mandate, not just from issuance and receivance, but for every single part of the audit trail, and then taking the lessons learned there. For anyone that has mandates that are coming up, again, making sure that you're on top of all of the different elements of the deadlines. So with Belgium, it was a one big bang approach. Everything happened as of the 1st of January. That isn't the case with all different mandates. If we think about France, what they've done, which again is very typical, is introduced a mandate in a phased approach. It also means that it hits different size companies at different times. It also means that the requirements also impact companies at different times. So as of September, all companies need to have the ability to receive invoices electronically. But for those invoices that don't have to issue them, there will be different reporting elements that they need to comply with. So again, just making sure that you understand the different components of a mandate and then doing that gap analysis to map it to your different entities as well. And then looking further afield towards next year, with Germany becoming the next European country to extend the passive mandate they already have to issuance. I think the mistake that companies often make is thinking that, oh, something's in 6 months, we've got loads of time. I think understanding exactly where you are operational in the world and having a map and timeline of all of the different timelines and deadlines that are coming up is the best way to be prepared and to also not rely on postponements. I mentioned in the French example that France did postpone their mandate several times. And again, when I speak to certain companies, I think that sometimes there's a reliance that that will happen. And again, I think being ready as soon as possible is the best way to be efficient and effective within your company. And then I think just keeping an eye on maybe those countries that aren't final, but are looking to announce something. So 2 countries that fall into this bucket would be the Netherlands, as I already mentioned, but also the UK. I think ensuring that you're keeping on top of the announced countries also allows you as a company and as a stakeholder to have your say. So with the Netherlands, they have had already an online consultation, which all VAT registered companies within the Netherlands have a chance to give feedback into. And in the UK, it's the same. At the moment, they've announced an intention to have a mandate as of 2028, and the tax administration within the UK at the moment is actively holding workshops with service providers. So Basware have been in those rooms, they've had those conversations, but they're also really keen to speak to companies as well. They want to understand from a company perspective what's important to them, what the government or tax administration can do to help them. And so I think, again, it's a really important way or really effective way for you to be able to share the benefits of your experience and give that to the tax administration so that they can flow that into their requirements. At the end of the day, the government wants to increase their tax revenues, which is why they're ultimately doing this and introducing these mandates. However, they don't want to do that at the risk of hurting their own companies and being a barrier to trade in the country as well. And again, there's so much information here that what I would say is if anyone has any specific questions on Basware, again, feel free to put it in the chat, but also reach out to us because we're more than happy to have a dedicated session with you. But I wanted to touch on how Basware really helps customers and companies with all of these different compliance requirements across the audit trail. So again, with mandates, I do think that we focus a lot on the issuance and the receipt, and obviously Basware can help with that with the dual-sided network we have. So we do support AR and AP. But outside of this issuance and receipt of invoices, we also help check compliance and fraud and duplicates. We also help with content validation. So invoices that are passed by a government may be compliant with fiscal regulations, but that doesn't mean that they'll be compliant with your own commercial validations that you want to see there. Basware can help automate this. We also have a compliant archive offering. So with all of the different invoice content requirements and issuance requirements, there are also audit requirements and archiving requirements. One of the things that I think companies get confused about right now with mandates is they often think that because the invoice is flowing to a government portal, it means that they then don't have to archive in a compliant way, and that isn't the case. So those archiving obligations still stand. You need to ensure that you're not just leaving your invoices in your operating system, because that typically won't be a compliant archive. And then we spoke about the importance of visibility and insights, and that's also something that you can get the benefit from in Basware. So all of the elements of this chain are really just ensuring that when the invoice is ready to be paid, we can also support with that as well. And then again, I wanted just to mention how this sits into the SAP ecosystem. So Basware is deeply tenured in the SAP ecosystem. So for decades, we've helped SAP's biggest and most complex customers drive outstanding outcomes in AP. We've helped over 600 global enterprises run Basware's invoice lifecycle management with SAP, and over 100 of them are on S/4HANA and counting. So again, this is something that we'd be more than happy to discuss in a dedicated session. But with that, I would welcome any questions in the chat. We're going to do the actual Q&A session at the end of the session. And thank you for having me today and for taking the time to listen to me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Abigail. I think now, Hans and Marianne, you can start with your presentation.
Very good. Thank you. Hope everyone can hear me fine. Well, first, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session with us. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll discuss a topic that becomes more and more important to finance and IT departments across Europe, which is, of course, electronic invoicing. And as we've heard in our previous presentation from Basware, governments are introducing new mandates and tax authorities are increasing compliance demands. And what we see in practice is that e-invoicing opens actually a broader discussion about process efficiency, automation, and also data quality. And today we would like to share some of our lessons that we have learned from helping SAP-driven organizations over the last couple of years. But before we dive into the topic itself, let me briefly introduce ourselves. My name is Marijn Westerning. Sales responsible for the Benelux region at xSuite, and I'm here together with my colleague Hans Willems. We support organizations in optimizing their finance processes within SAP environments. And unlike many software vendors, xSuite has a very specific focus. Our expertise is very much centered around document-driven business processes within SAP, and particular accounts payable, procurement, and e-invoicing. So this is exactly what we do, because when people hear the term e-invoicing, they often think about sending or receiving an XML file, and in reality, that's only part of a very small overall process, because we believe that the actual value is created when an invoice is validated, is matched, is approved, is posted, maybe even paid, archived, and made available in all the reports. And that's why xSuite focuses on what we call agentic accounts payable automation for SAP-driven enterprises. So our objective is to automate the entire invoice life cycle. And this includes capturing an invoice from multiple channels, validating information, and enriching with SAP master data. So what sets us apart? What differentiates xSuite from other providers in the market? And there are really three factors. First, our SAP expertise. We've been developing SAP-focused solutions for more than 30 years, and SAP is really the foundation of everything what we do. Second, our holistic approach. Many organizations work with multiple vendors for scanning, for workflows, archiving, e-invoicing, AI, compliance, and we believe that there's a significant value in providing all of these components from one single source. And third is future-proof technology. The world of finance automation is evolving rapidly with artificial intelligence, cloud architectures, and all of these compliance regulations that you've heard everything about in the past 30 minutes. And this continuously is making changes. And our platform combines these modern AI capabilities with the flexible cloud deployment options. Then if we go to the next slide, some of our customers, and why this is obviously relevant, because the challenges that we discuss are not unique to one industry. It's across manufacturing, retail, healthcare, food production, logistics, and so on. And they see a number of challenges, e-invoicing, but also general invoice volumes, they continue to increase. Resources, they remain limited. And yeah, there's a lot that is expected from finance teams. They need to deliver more insights and so on. And that's why organizations like BMW Group, Panasonic, Canon, Veolia, Carrefour, and all of these on the slides, and obviously many more, have invested in X-Suite solutions within their SAP environments. And the underlying objectives are actually very similar, because they want to increase automation, they want to improve visibility, reduce processing costs, and strengthen the compliance. If we move indeed to the last one, the SAP certification that we have in actually one of the most important topics for SAP customers today, because it's all about future readiness. Many organizations are currently planning or even executing their move towards SAP S4 and the clean core strategy. And the challenge is that every technology decision made today must still make sense in 5 or 10 years from now. And that's why the certification matters. So X-Suite is fully certified for S4HANA across current deployment models. And we were even the first accounts payable solution certified for SAP Clean Core. For our customers, this gives the confidence that the automation strategy remains aligned with SAP's direction towards the future. And that brings us to the next session of today's presentation, where I hand over to Hans.
Okay, thank you, Marijn, for the introduction of X-Suite. My part is to explain what we are doing with e-invoicing, and we are preparing the future, your invoice process in the future. We, of course, we have updated already in Belgium a lot of parts, and first I would like to bring some lessons learned about the implementations we did in especially Belgium, which started beginning of this year with the mandate. We see that a simple connection to payable network does not automate your invoice process. If you have a complete tool to automate it, then you could use the X-Suite AP solution for a full integrated accounts payable solution. But we also see that single field contents are not compliant. Although the invoice is compliant and a compliance check is done, then maybe field contents are not according to what you can use in your backend system. If we look, and what we have in place for this is our cloud environment, where we can do a conversion of data with a validation amongst the master data in your own system. If you go to details, you see the party text scheme of the company ID is often wrongly filled. Probably all you are working in SAP, we know that in SAP it is always filled without any dots and spaces in between. But we see often in XMLs or in the payable invoices that they fill it with even with spaces and dots inside. So you need to convert it in right formats. Then we also see that a buy reference is not always filled with the right purchase order. There are multiple fields. We have an order reference, buyer reference, and if you fill order reference, you don't need to fill in buyer reference. So there are compliance rules where you have to ensure that you fill in the right number. And also the content of the fields can be validated in our Helix cloud environment, where we do, based on AI components and the master data in the backend, we can do a validation if the data is really correct or not. And what we also see that a lot of invoice item data on invoices. We see that quite a lot of XMLs which are created, payable invoices, have multiple items. Even for one item, they have 3 lines in the XML. And yeah, you need to ensure that for an MM invoice, you need to connect it towards your purchase orders. For FI invoices, it's often 100, or maybe I have seen invoices with more than 1,000 lines in the XML. And then you need to ensure that you transfer the right data to the right place in SAP, of course. And this, if you have a fully integrated system, then you can ensure that all this data is validated and comes into your backend system as a correct data. How are we doing this in the whole flow? We are talking now on the input format for the e-invoice. And then we can have multiple entry channels. We have a network, payable network, we know that. We can connect to portals, like is done in Poland. And the French will also have a third connection towards their network portal in France. Or you can have emails, like in Germany. Germany, they don't have any rule to use a payable network or a portal. In Germany, it's still allowed to send an e-invoice, they call it the X-Rechnung or Zugwert invoice, to send it by email. So also this is an entry channel you need to take into account. The entry channels will then put into the next 2 blocks, which are the cloud environments where we can do the data conversion, the extraction, the analyze, and ensure that the invoice can be matched towards your backend system. In the prediction server, we can support you with accounting data, who is the best first approver, to update vendor data if not everything is valid, to find right company codes, and so on. And after all these first steps, it goes over to SAP, and as we are fully integrated in SAP, you have the possibility to validate an invoice inside your own SAP environment. You can do corrections, you can start the process, and then the valid workflow, of course, can start for approvals and release after release for payments. And to be 100% compliant, we also can deliver an archive, a cloud archive, where you, of course, can retrieve your invoices from SAP, and where you store and we have a compliant storage for all your in and outbound invoices. If you move into the process a little bit further, then we will see the same. We call it our electronic document network adapter. And this is a cloud-based processing for e-invoicing. So we already spoke about the entry channels, email, portal, networks. E-invoice is coming into our EDNA network. It is possible you have multiple channels, multiple formats, and your ERP system only expects one format. And that is exactly what happens in our EDNA solution. We create one format, and there is one connection to your own ERP system. And the complete compliance check and format changes towards your expected backend system are done in our EDNA solution. For the outbound part, it's exactly the same. Your AP department, AR department sends out invoice, and they are used in SAP to just process SD invoices. These will be sent in one format towards the outbound, and it doesn't matter if you are sending invoices for Belgium, or you will send them for the Netherlands, or you will send them later on for France. You send out the invoice to our EDNA environment, and there we convert it to the compliant format which needed on the receiver. And then we transmit it or by mail or to the portal or via payable network towards the recipient. And of course, the original document will be archived in the archive behind. So this is the whole flow. We can see what happens. And the most important thing is, once it is set up, it can be valid for all future mandates, because we ensure that the mandates are kept. If you look a little bit further into what in each step is done, you receive the document. There is, of course, the retrieval of the original document. There is a compliance check for the format normalization, what we say. We are doing also an ISO code mapping, all the mappings and the codes which are required in a payable invoice are mapped towards the data. We're creating a visualization of the document so that also if you only receive an XML invoice, that it is readable for the one who has to approve it. We do a master data reconciliation, and then we transfer it into SAP, into the workflow. More in detail, we have our network portals with invoice source, data verification depending on the input channel. And we are using Ecosio as our hub and integrator. And there we have a technical invoice check. We transfer it to a canonical format. We have the fully compliant check, and then it will be sent to our EDNA solution, or it is retrieved from an email server directly into our EDNA solution. And after this, we transfer this to our Helix environment, where a second check is done on the ISO code mapping. We unpack all the attachments which are in it, and we create a visualization of the original invoice. And depending on the backend system you have, we transfer the most important invoice data towards the Helix environment, where we do the sub-creditor ID, the company code correct, the order number, and we do a validation check on all these data. Depending on the backend system you have, if you are a public cloud user, we can put it in our sphere, where we have our clean core certificate on, where in the BTP environment, which is connected to public cloud environments. Or if you still have a private cloud environment, then we have an interface in between where we even can create the archive link attachments. We can do some data type adjustments, and there we have some possibilities to do some additional data checks for our customers. And then it will be sent to the private cloud SAP environments, where you can start your complete workflow process to approve your internal invoices. If you check what's happening on the outbound side, then your SD invoices, your accounts receivable department, it can just create an invoice as they are doing at this moment. And there we create an invoice run in SAP. Then we perform with our software an ISO code mapping towards the real codes which are needed in the network. We do a formalization of the format. We send it to our EDNA solution. And again, there we have an ISO code mapping available to ensure that the country-specific codes are used. We do a transformation of the e-document, compliance check, of course, and then we send it out towards our network, towards the customer. Also here we see we have our SAP environment, with recipient mapping, we have an ISO code mapping, a condition scheme customizing. You have your own condition scheme where you build up your invoices inside SAP. Archiving, you can just use your own transactions, VF01, VF31 in SAP, and we have integrated monitor into SAP. A normalized format is sent to SAP, to the E-DNA solution, and from there we create in Ecosio the final format which should be sent out towards your customer. Then, already explained in the previous sessions, there are a lot of requirements already available. payable network, we have several companies like Belgium which are using the payable network. Germany can also use payable network, but our experience is that 90% is sending it at this moment still by email. Romania has the ANAF portal, Hungary with the ANAF portal, Italy with SDI portals. All these are connected towards our E-DNA solution. KSEF in Poland, and of course now on the roadmap, which is now available, is France, and we are working on Spain also to get them available on our portal. If you look to the compliance, we ensure that it's always up to date according to the compliance rules. We have always an invoice data validation, integration check, compliance with EN 16931, format validation. We are payable certified portal, and we can have this contingency transaction control portals. We are certified to connect towards them. Then if you look to the platform basics, is a multi-tenant public cloud environment. So that means once we ensure for a certain country we are compliant, all our customers are compliant immediately. And we have, of course, a customer tenant principle, where we have secure connections via SSL and OAuth authentication. You can connect by a REST API. And of course, we can have user and group administration based on Azure AD, creation of system users, and we can assign certain roles towards our users. And of course, in our tool, we have business feature like incoming invoice ledgers, outgoing invoice ledgers, and all the invoice details who can read the data in our ledger also. If you look then, as we say, we transfer all the data, including invoice data. We create a visualization of the XML so that also people who cannot read XML files can read the invoice receipt. And we have direct access to the SAP master data. And we include, of course, we are fully embedded in SAP and on standard SAP workflow-based workflow with the best practice, which was built up in the 30 years experience we already have inside SAP. At the end, your benefits. We align with your strategy on moving it from SAP ERP S/4HANA or into the public cloud with our BTP environment. We have everything from one source. Sending and receiving of e-invoices are done by one company. We can handle all international complexities. All requirements, all the countries are met. We are ensure that we have always an up-to-date format with a technical validation, and it can be a plug-and-play connection to start with implementing your e-invoice process. I hope this could give you an insight on what X-Suite is doing, what they can support for you on your side. And of course, if you have any question, then you can contact us afterwards. Just and if you have any other question, you can put it in the chat at this moment, and we can handle our chat after in the Q&A question. So for me now, I will handle it back towards Steve, and then he can continue with the Q&A session. Steve?
So thank you all for joining today's Sapiens Finance session. I hope today's presentation gave you a clear and practical perspective on how organizations can move from compliance as an obligation to compliance as a true driver of performance. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now to Hans, Marijn, or Abigail.
I see one question to my name from Arthur. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. I see one question coming from Arthur to what for X-Suite incoming e-invoicing. You mentioned Sphere or public cloud and Cube for private cloud for X-Suite outbound e-invoices. You only mentioned Invoice Cube. It's correct. For embedded solution, we only have a solution available inside the embedded private cloud environment, private environments, private cloud or ERP systems. For public clouds, you can always connect via an API towards our eDNA solution. So there you can connect by the API. We don't have any software inside the public cloud because we cannot develop inside the public cloud, of course.
Okay, thank you. And what about on-prem?
And on-prem, we can also have the outbound invoices. We can install our software and then we can connect it towards your condition schemes, and then we can send out the e-invoice by our platform.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
Yeah. And the next question is the confirmation messages. Yes, of course, all confirmation messages will come back and will also be archived into what the archive you are using for your legal archiving. Any further question? Then Steve, I gave it back to you.
Yeah. So if you would have any follow-up questions or would like to continue the conversation, please do not hesitate to reach out to us or directly to the speakers. And finally, feel free to stay connected with Sapiens and join our upcoming finance events to continue exploring topics like digital finance transformation and compliance. Thank you again for your time and engagement, and we hope to see you at one of our next sessions. Have a great afternoon. I would give a special thanks to Hans, Marijn, and Abigail, and all of you who joined this session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.